This is Washington State. Upper left corner, mainland USA. Home of eternal wines and Drinkwashington State. This is Brad Binko. He owns these labels and he's fascinated with old varietals. He's the whole reason this story is being told. In 2017, he was awarded the Bill Powers Sabbatical Grant by the Washington Wine Foundation. And in 2018, he used the opportunity to travel to Chile and Argentina to learn more about their winemaking techniques and old vines, with a special interest in a very special grape. This is a Drinkwashington State wine bottle. Inside is a very special blend of wine, featuring that very special grape, the Carmenere. It's an ancient grape, one of Europe's very first, that's watched the rise and fall of empires and kings, endured plagues and pestilence, outlived the 8-track cassette, disco, and the pet rock, even narrowly avoided going the way of the dodo or the dinosaurs, outliving its own extinction with a resurrection worthy of Hollywood cinema. It turns out the Carmenere has a habit of being perpetually misidentified, and it's possible the grape may actually be the one known as Vidure, a Cabernet Sauvignon that was at one time identified as the grandfather of all red Bordeaux grapes. The Carmenere may even be Biturica, an ancient Roman vine originating in Iberia, near modern-day Spain and Portugal. So what, are all modern Carmenere grapes some sort of hybrid cloned from DNA samples frozen in amber? Unfortunately, no, they are not. History is, believe it or not, a little more complicated than that. Let's jump back in time and start at the end. The end of the line, that is. The year is 1857. James Buchanan is sworn in as the 15th President of the United States. Elisha Otis installs his first elevator at 488 Broadway, New York, New York. Jingle Bells is composed. And grapevines from North America are cut for transport to Europe for the purpose of grafting trials and presumably general irresponsible mad scientist-style experimentation. Unfortunately for the mid-19th century, the Department of Environmental Conservation is just a string of words that don't exist yet, and no one bothers to check the vines for a nearly microscopic aphid-related sap-sucking insect that comes to be known as Phylloxera vistatrix. In Latin, literally, Phylloxera, the devastator. In America, the plants have built up a natural resistance to the pest. But in 1858, it is believed, these infested vines arrive in Europe, possibly on newly built steamships that traverse the oceans at record speeds, allowing Phylloxera to survive the trip for the first time in history. 5 years later, in 1863, vines inexplicably begin to wither in the southern Rhone region of France. By 1889, France's wine production has dropped from 84.5 million hectoliters 15 years earlier to just 23.4 million. Vineyards close. Wages plummet. Businesses are lost. Absinthe sales skyrocket as chasing the green fairy suddenly becomes considerably less expensive than chasing down a bottle of red or white. Real information is hard to come by, and misinformation runs rampant. Some fear tuberculosis, or consumption as it's known at the time, has somehow made a leap from the lung to the vine. Frantically, someone suggests that burying a live toad under each vine will remove the apparent poison from the plant because, well, the French, I guess. France's economy eventually takes a 10 billion franc hit. Considering the roughly 55 billion that equates to in modern US dollars, it's clearly not just sour grapes to the French. And that is just France. Across the continent, between 60 and 90% of all European vineyards die out. Replanting and grafting efforts begin in earnest toward the end of the century, but Carmenere is difficult to find and reluctant to grow. Bordeaux's cool, damp springs encourage the onset of colure, a viticultural hazard that prevents vines from flowering and flowers from turning into grapes. Carmenere yields are low and rarely healthy. Vineyards replace them with new, less susceptible vines of other varieties, and Carmenere planting is, in effect, abandoned. Remaining old vines die off over the years. The Carmenere is extinct. But no. If there's one thing the history of evolution has taught us, it's that life will not be contained. Life breaks free. It expands to new territories and crashes through barriers, painfully, maybe even dangerously. But, well, there it is. I'm simply saying that life, finds a way. So how did it do that here, specifically? Let's jump back in time again, a little bit further this time, to that whole painfully, maybe even dangerously part of the timeline. This is Chile. In 1535, explorer Diego de Almagro and his band of Spanish conquistadors, translation, conquerors, a name only slightly less aggressive and ominous sounding than the Devastator, entered Chile from Peru to respectfully introduce themselves to the locals. No, not really. They want gold, and when they don't find much, they amuse themselves by killing a bunch of people instead. In case you're wondering, this is all entirely above board for a group that modestly refers to itself as conquerors. Along with all the death, pestilence, and bad attitudes, conquistadors bring with them the area's first vines, which are planted near Santiago around the time of the city's founding in 1540. Chile quickly proves to be a grape grower's paradise, but it isn't until the mid-19th century that the French varieties for which it is now known are imported and planted. Today, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Merlot, and Sauvignon Blanc all thrive in Chile's Colchagua Valley, making it one of the 10 largest wine-producing countries in the world. According to USDA GAIN reports, Chile exports more wine in both quantity and value to the US than any other South American country. But where along the way does Chile get its hands on viable Carmenere vines?
You know the history about the Carmenere?
I do, yes.
About the Chilean history.
Remember in 1857 when all this devastator trouble started? It turns out, a few years earlier, smack dab in the middle of the 19th century, Chile is busy rapidly acquiring and planting the French varietals that have since become its bread and butter. Carmenere cuttings from Bordeaux are mixed with Merlot, misidentified yet again on one side of the ocean or the other, and are planted alongside them. Ironically, the same lackluster quality control that would later set loose a continent-conquering aphid had somehow, preemptively, prevented the extinction of the very vine it would attempt to wipe from the face of the earth less than a decade later. Ain't history a trip?
We didn't know we have Carmenere. Nobody knew what Carmenere was.
For decades, Chile produces Merlot Tardío from what it believes to be an odd Merlot clone that ripens at the wrong end of the season.
People thinking it's our Chile Merlot, but which is the problem? Merlot, we picking the Merlot now in March, and Carmenere absolutely is the last one in May.
This all changes in 1994 when Jean-Michel Borisquat, that's about as good as I can do with that, makes what can only be described as a discovery centuries in the making. Borisquat is an ampelographer, an expert in the study and classification of cultivated varieties of grape, and DNA tests later prove him right. Carmenere is alive and well, and not extinct in the slightest. It's thriving all over Chile in ways very specific to the area in which it's grown. Maipo Valley is one of Chile's most important wine-producing regions. It's located at the very northern end of Chile's extensive Central Valley and is home to some of the country's most prestigious vines.
This is from the coastal part of the Maipo Valley, around 35 kilometers from the Pacific Ocean, so it's still a very fresh area for red grapes.
Different mineral content in the soils where Carmenere is grown also change the way the plants develop. In the Colchagua Valley, the soil encourages the roots to dig deep, and the warm, dry climate with little influence from cold winds improves the concentration of the fruit. The Carmenere has smooth tannins and low acidity, with flavors of red fruits and notes of smoke and spices.
I mean, there are amazing Carmenere, especially in Colchagua because of the weather and soil. The terroir is amazing here for Carmenere.
In the heart of the Colchagua Valley is much more warmer.
The soils in Apalta are red, so you have granite and red. So you have a lot of iron in it.
Quartz, Celis.
Quartz, exactly, Celis. And it's a very poor soil, you know? It takes a lot of effort to the vine to go deep into the ground to find a little bit of humidity and water.
This changes the flavor of the grape, and thus develops the flavor of the wine.
Carmenere is very seductive. It's not a wine that needs time to develop. It immediately speaks to you. That's what I feel about Carmenere here in Chile. It's very expressive. It's a very spicy also, right?
Carmenere is this variety that gives you all richy kind of flavors. You can have red berries together with blueberries, sweet spices, earthy smells all in the same wine. At the same time, it's very smooth, easy to drink. It's this kind of grape that if you're not a connoisseur, you will love it because it's very easy to love.
Here is really spicy Carmenere, and with black pepper, that kind of flavor is really round. It goes on that route, really spicy, really round.
Because of that well-roundedness, Carmenere is both bottled on its own and frequently used as a blending wine to mellow or take on flavors from stronger varieties.
It's a great blender, or can be bottled on its own as an individual Carmenere.
I really love blending Carmenere with another guy because for me it's soft tannins, very spicy, and I have a good partner with another tough guy. In this facility, my idea is a soft Carmenere with another tough guy. Petit Verdot and Petit Syrah, strong guy. And more percentage in the blend of Carmenere, less percentage of the Petit Verdot and Petit Syrah, but in the end, for me, it's a very friendly wine and drinkable.
After picking and stopping, or harvesting and extraction if you don't want to risk sounding uncouth, the fruit macerates for upwards of a week straight, which may or may not indicate something about its vitality and stamina. Maceration, which is a hilarious word to say in front of nieces and nephews, is the part of the process in which crushed grape skins are left in the extracted juices to soak, imparting color, tannins, and aroma to the liquid that will eventually ferment into wine. Added enzymes can speed up the process and help deliver more consistent flavoring across large batches.
But normally, it's a variety with very soft and round tannins where you can extract a little bit more and you don't take any risk on extra extraction. Depending on the style of the winemaker, we keep on the skins the wine for about a week.
After fermentation.
After the alcoholic fermentation, or we take it out immediately after the sugar is done.
Well, that depends on the style, right?
Yeah. We use enzymes to act on the skins a little bit more, and then after the pressing to have a better settle down after the malolactic fermentation.
Then it's in the fermentation bins, where natural yeasts begin the fermentation process. Sugars in the grape juice are converted into alcohol, and boom, you've got yourself a Saturday night. Well, in a couple of years. First, the wine has to rest, generally between 18 months and 3 years, and it doesn't do that in bottles. Nope. This is where barrels, also known as casks, come in. Materials and methods can vary widely between manufacturers, but oak is a very common choice.
In this case, I want to express a little bit more. I use bigger barrel fluid in general. But that is also beside the variety because I'm trying to show a soil. That for me is the granite to when you make these all different blocks and everything, the idea is not to cover it. I make Carmenere also without oak that I age in concrete. And the people will say you're crazy because the industry put oak also to cover a little bit that greenness, or put a little bit of Syrah or something, you know. And the idea is to make a pure, honest, naked Carmenere and show itself. And that's a little bit the idea with the wines.
Most barrels are toasted with flames during shaping, but at T & Cooper's in Chile, Brad learned firsthand about their patented steaming process that only they can use.
The cooperage itself in Santiago was amazing. It's a new facility. They just opened it up about 6 months ago. Being able to walk through the facility, see all the lumber, see how they do the process. They use steam, which is actually a copyrighted method that only they can use rather than the traditional fire burning method to toast the barrels. And it gives them a more consistent method.
After aging, the wine can be evaluated for blending purposes.
I can have condensed tannins and I can have concentration and roundness during the 12 or 14 months in barrels instead of having in a maceration after the alcoholic fermentation. Yeah. So after the alcoholic fermentation is done, I took it out immediately to keep the nose much more clean and pure.
Gotcha.
On this 2017, you can see immediately this color, this deeper purple color. That's, pH. It's very young, but you can immediately see that beautiful color. Yeah. It's a very bright wine also.
Yeah, I still with the leaves in between.
Yeah.
pH here is around 3.6.
Yeah.
And it has very nice concentration, full flavor, with very soft tannins again. Mm-hmm. So you can go alone in the fermentation, or you can co-ferment it with other varieties with a little bit more structure and acidity. I prefer to make it pure, and then after the barrel aging, go with another variety.
Tempranillo with Cab, 50-50. Carmenere with Petit Syrah. Wow. This is 75-25, more or less.
Back in Walla Walla, home of Brad's wine and a city name that only gets more interesting to say if you've had some, Brad is already using new techniques and lessons he's learned during his trip abroad. Since establishing himself in the wine space in 2014, Brad has produced numerous 90-point wines and has had write-ups and articles from the Seattle Times to Wine Enthusiast. His Drinkwashington state label produces a pure Carmenere each year, while Eternal Wines mixes a small percentage into its Rocket Man Red to impart a nice, spicy finish. All of these grapes are harvested by hand in the same American Viticultural Area, or AVA, in Washington state. It's Brad's vision for the future of wine, and it all started a couple of thousand years ago.
It's from our Drinkwashington state label. This is the third vintage that we've made of this wine. Carmenere is really nice by itself at 100%. And then just to contrast that, we're going to give you our Rocket Man Red, which is 5% Carmenere blended into it. And basically the reason that I did that was just to give it a more spicy and complex finish. And so it's kind of cool to taste the differences. Yeah, not too much spice, but definitely get some of that nice green pepper, almost a little jalapeno. So now when you taste the next wine, try to think about that taste from that one and see if you can pull it out in the final blend here.
Ooh, just like right on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's a good example of 100% Carmenere versus us blending in a little bit at the end for a Bordeaux blend.
Oh, cheers.
Cheers.
The Carmenere is one of history's most unique examples of something that's been forgotten, but isn't gone. As is the case with some of humanity's greatest treasures, the story of the vine's near loss and unexpected rediscovery makes for a fascinating historical journey through agricultural, financial, and political climates of the past, and can help us connect lessons learned therein to what we're doing in the present, and what we want to be doing in the future. So there you have it. Once down and out in Europe, the Carmenere is now an up-and-comer in Washington state. Thanks to people like Brad Binko and his labels, the past isn't an untouchable black and white photograph in the back of a dusty old tome. It's vibrant, full of reds, greens, and purples, and it's on its way back into the present. Sometimes, to get a better view of the future, we have to take a step backward into the past and listen. Because you never really know what kind of story you're going to hear through the grapevine.